Hey everyone, so this is what seems to be the second episode of Mental Health in Tech. So this thing is actually becoming a thing now and it's starting to take off, which is scary. Not to go on to too much of a tangent, but I actually thought I wanted to share this today, and I think there's a lot of overlap, is I spoke to someone this week and they said they started going to therapy, and unfortunately they realized that it works. Because now it means I have to go back. And I think it's the same here. Like, there's almost like there would have been a relief if it's like just completely bombed and people weren't interested. And it's like, we gave it a good try and like there just isn't interest. But, like we've gotten a lot of really great feedback from the first episode. It seems like now we have to do this thing, which isn't fun, but here we are. So, as last time, I am joined by Skalk Neetling. I'll maybe just introduce myself super quickly, and then I'll allow him to introduce himself. And then we are also joined by Liesel, who's going to speak quite a bit about kind of the mental health side of hiring and working like with people in terms of operations of a company and so forth. So actually on LinkedIn, I almost want to say put a link or whatever you do on LinkedIn, put a message where I said we're super interested in hearing a bit more about kind of the legal side of things and kind of the actual internal organizational side of things in terms of how mental health is dealt with and so forth. And this obviously varies from organization to organization, but I feel it's something that's not spoken about enough, which is also something where the scope of what we're doing, specifically in terms of the tech industry, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations there. But so let me just not continue from there, because otherwise I'm going to do the entire talk myself. So, in terms of introduction of myself, so my name is Skalk Venter. I'm mostly a contractor. I work in the space of tech, do a lot of teaching, currently academic head at a place called CodeSpace, where we work with a lot of students and so forth in terms of income share agreement models and so forth, where you come and study and then once you graduate, you actually pay back a certain percentage of that money as part of your salary that you get after becoming a developer, which I think is a very interesting model, and which is why I joined CodeSpace. So that's kind of where most of my time is at the moment, and then I just do actual contract product design and programming and development work. So that's where I'm finding myself at the moment. Purely just in terms of my mental context and background. So I've been struggling with kind of mental things as long as I can remember. Currently on Zytomil and what's the other one? Venlaw. I think last time I neglected to mention that. And I think it's important to bring that to the conversation, because I think not only does mental health itself need to be destigmatized, but I also think there's a massive stigma even within the mental health community around medication. So I maybe want to just put that out there and kind of own that. Skalk Neetling, I'm happy for you to kind of do a bit of an overview of who you are and why you are even here.
Yeah, thanks, Skalk. And I do agree on that last topic about the medicine. I think we're getting to a better point when it comes to asking and accepting help. But I think the medication thing is still something people see as almost like a moral failure, which I do not quite understand. It's always the thing of but if you have a headache, do you just grin and bear it? Or if it's really bad, do you take medication for it? How's that any different? So I am a creator, I'll say. I do many things. I do podcasting. I run a company that is focused on open source and ethical tech. I run a couple of communities. I've been contracting at Mozilla for going on 12 years now, doing various things. The last 4 years, mainly MDN, which I think a couple of people will know that listen to this. And other than that, I've been living with mental health and mental illness for since I was 15, I think. I roughly kind of pinpoint that as a point in time. Variety of stuff, everything from, anxiety to deep depression and self-medicating, as a lot of us with those things do, with all the wrong medication, those that come in a bottle that you buy at a place.
It's not Benadu.
No, so yeah,
over the counter is also a problem, but yeah.
No, so looking for answers at the bottom of a bottle, never finding any, but keeping on looking. So that turned into a problem in itself, especially after my dad passed about 4 years ago. But then it was kind of also an interesting point where I went completely off the deep end for a bit, but then realized it and found that it was the time to change. And now I've been sober now for over a year. So really chuffed about that. I'm highly encouraged. It's quite a different life. Thanks, Liesel. And my mental health has also gotten a lot better. I think it's a combination of factors, but I do think that played a big role because, just doing something that isn't good for you, for your health, and having this concern about my health in general, having health anxiety. Those two things don't work well together. So now that I'm not actively sabotaging myself, I've been able to deal with stuff better. So we did a quite nice thing in the first one where we did this mental health check-in at the beginning, where each one just said how are you doing, and how's your week been, that kind of thing. And I really like that, and I think we should probably do that every time. So I'll kick it off, and then I'll pass it over to Liesel, and then Liesel, you can pass it back to Scott so you can do your check-in. So for me,
sorry, I just want to interrupt. So maybe you can do yours, and then Liesel can introduce herself.
Yes.
And then do hers, and then I'll just go after that. Yeah. Yeah, no, so I just don't want Liesel to misunderstand and think that she needs to start talking about how she's feeling before she even explains who she is.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Exactly. So, the last week's been, as strange enough as we talked in the previous one, it's been really busy, but it's been good in the sense that it's work that I enjoy and stuff, but so it's been pretty okay actually. But yesterday in our front garden, for the fifth time since 2020, the bloody mains pipe burst again, and it's just mud and water everywhere. And the people from the municipality that came out was just I don't know what these people are doing. It took them the entire day till 10 last night to fix one pipe that burst in one spot, and now they're gone, and we don't know if they're going to come back. So we just have this big hole and mud everywhere. And the last 4 times we ended up having to pay out of pocket and do all this work to fix it ourselves. So today I'm frustrated and tired, but I still have a bunch of work to do. So I have to now find a balance between those things. So I think my general check-in would be, it was pretty good until yesterday. And then things kind of went south. And that's life. But it's okay. I feel okay. I'm surprised at how well I'm dealing with it. So that feels encouraging. So I'm seeing it in a positive light. But that's me. Now I'm going to hand it over to Liesel.
Cool, thank you. I want to say both to Scott times 2. Thanks. So just a quick just a quick introduction for myself. So currently I'm working for an organization as a COO. I always joke about it, but we're definitely small enough to not need C titles, but I've got it now, so you can't take that away from me. But the people, because we're smaller, sort of the chief people function then also sits under the role that I have in the organization. Having to oversee people and handle comms and logistics and the HR element of that is very taxing. It is probably 60% of the whole job. But regardless, I enjoy it a lot. I think the people angle of it is what I enjoy the most. I've been in the tech industry for 15 years or so, perhaps a little bit longer, but if it's longer, I don't want to know. And yeah, I mean, that's tech. It's also always challenging. I've never seen it not be challenging, because the speed at which the technologies, the tools, the software we use, it is just ever changing. I mean, it's the fastest moving in the world, probably. So even if you look at how technology companies are driving the way that other organizations work, the concept of going from a cubicle to what they call it, open floor. I can't even remember what that was called. Open plan. They did it, and then the whole world followed, and then people went back to having their own offices, and then they went back, we've gone remote, and now we can hire across the world, and absolutely leading the way. But it's not there's not a space to sit on your laurels and see that happen. You have to keep up. So that having that agility and flexibility, and constantly reinventing your organization to stay up to speed, I think that's what makes it a stressful just stressful circumstances to work under in the first place. And then, while we are divulging medications openly, I was on Muzak for a great many years, on quite a high dose of. I am no longer, which I'm quite happy about.
Okay.
However, I've had to swap it for a little bit of Urbanol, because I developed anxiety because of prolonged exposure to stress over many years. So I now have to take something to just keep that under control. And then as far as my health check goes, we're kind of sitting on a possible organizational pivot, which is really exciting, but also very scary. I'm overworked. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm almost also because I always aim the highest I can possibly aim. I'm also a little bit I live in a little space of disappointment if people around me don't live up to my expectations. But that's my own problem. And so I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably at a 7 today. If 0 is the best circumstance. And that's my whole intro. I don't know if you have any questions.
No, that was amazing. I think also one thing the person that kind of introduced us to this was actually Gideon. So he actually recommended it, and it was actually really great. And I think something that's very important, for me as well, is just because of my personality, I'm one of those people that just want to make everything okay. So my immediate gut reaction is to be no, it's okay. Oh man, that's so inspiring. Or that's and just allowing it to be okay, you are overworked. That sucks. And it is what it is, just allowing that and not going yeah, but Liesel, but you're such an inspiration for everyone, and we get all these, not having any disclaimers. So that's very hard for me. So from my own side, I had since the last time we spoke, I had a very tough time. I think I gave myself carbon monoxide poisoning by accident. Just because of where the generator is placed, and my office, we have a weird setup where the garage is actually higher than my office, but my office is next to the garage, but it's actually you go downstairs to get to my office, and some reason the garage door shutting from I don't know whether it was the wind or whatever, and because I was recording videos and my daughter was going mad outside, I closed all the windows and doors and whatever, and I think I gave myself carbon monoxide poisoning, and the only reason why I think that is because I initially thought I had the flu, and then the next day I was just fine, and it's as if nothing happened. So I don't think it was the flu, unless it was a one-day flu. And also, it's unlike anything I've experienced. So I started getting like a fever, not a fever, but I don't know what the English would be, koue koors, like very cold and shivering and whatever. And so I was like, oh man, I'm getting the flu and whatever. And I went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was just like in so much pain, and I felt like I was dying, and literally like the entire the bed was just like soaked from like sweat. And I'm not even ashamed to say, like, I was like literally crying because I thought I was going to die. I went to just get in the shower and I was like, yo, and so that was not fun. But one thing that kind of like stuck with me, that kind of still has me a bit rattled from that whole experience, is so obviously after that I kind of read up a bit about it, and like, so I wasn't like in any like actual real danger, because like most people, when it gets bad enough, they start like vomiting and whatever, and they just remove themselves out of whatever is causing the situation and whatever. So most people that die from it are people that kind of like get drunk and they kind of pass out or whatever, and then, you know, they kind of get carbon monoxide poisoning. So, but like that feeling of feeling like I'm dying, like just my whole body aching and whatever, I think that rattled me a lot, because at one point I was literally thinking like, man, this is how I'm going, you know, this is it. And like I just felt so alone. And I think that experience very rattled me, like just that feeling of helplessness, and there's nothing my wife can do, there's nothing anyone can do. Like, this is where I'm now, and like I'm feeling this, and and there's no way to fix it. I think that kind of rattled me a bit, and I'm still a bit like not great from that. So, but much better now. But like in that moment, it really sucked. So yeah, that was kind of what I've been doing, trying to not get myself killed. Yeah,
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't even realize that generators pose that kind of sort of threat to you.
Yeah. So, but it's also it's a kind of a perfect storm of things.
Yes.
Like, once again, you know, the fact that my office is lower, and obviously carbon monoxide is heavy, so it goes down, and I closed all the windows and all of that. So. Yeah, but it's actually, yeah, like I think someone told me, like, it's one of those things where most people don't actually realize how dangerous like carbon monoxide is. And they're just like, you know, running generators in the garage or whatever. But yeah, I learned my lesson the hard way. Now I'm like overcompensating. Now I'm like, you know, screw all the neighbors. They have to listen to my generator now. I'm just leaving that door wide open. Yeah. But yeah, so mentally, like a week after that or whatever, I was really like having a hard time mentally. I'm much better now, but it's like almost like there's this little thing in the back of my head still that's kind of like still a bit rattled by that I kind of try not think about it. But yeah, fun times all around. Yeah. All right, but fortunately for you guys, you're not here on the Skulk Venter show, so I'm much more interested in what Liesel has to share. And so you did introduce kind of a bit in terms of IO Digital, where you work and kind of what you do there. And I just want to take a moment to just appreciate the fact that you are willing to speak openly about this, and also that IO is a place that allows you to speak openly about this. I think that is something that shouldn't be taken for granted, and I think is a massive kudos actually to an organization, because I don't want to name any organizations or whatever, but there was recently on the mental health channel on ZA Tech, someone shared an article that went about mental health and whatever, that was published by an organization, effectively, Mental Health Matters, and all of that is true, and like it was a really good article. But one of the things that they noted when they shared the article is that they did feel that it placed disproportional responsibility on the individual itself. Like, here are some things that you can do to help with mental health, like exercise, meditate, and talking about like the tech industry is like a high demand, stressful environment or whatever. But yeah, like I don't want to talk about it too much because I think it's a great article and I highly recommend it, and it has like some really great stuff in it. But like, I think it also shows that there's this entire side of mental health in the tech industry that people are just ignoring as if it doesn't exist, for obvious reasons, because you don't want to burn bridges. You don't want to be like, these organizations where people have to come in on Saturdays or whatever. Screw those guys, and then you need to apply at one of those places one day for a job or whatever. So I want to kind of just like deliberately say that thanks for actually yourself and IO as an organization for being open about this and being like, this is complex and we're willing to talk about it. We're not going to pretend as if it doesn't exist, because this conversation needs to be had.
Yeah, no, yesterday when I was doing a little bit of preparation, I kind of started writing things out. I'm a visual person, and I use Miro, but I use my notebook before I go to Miro. And I was writing it out, and then there was a sort of like almost like a little bit of a framework that stood out to me in terms of implementing these things in an organization. And so I highlighted them, and I might actually start with that, because I think it raises a few things that actually make this hard in organizations. So for me, the first sort of heading is education, right? So if you've got a company that's built, such as ours, that really works in a team structure, it's not departments, it's teams. You would want at least the leaders of those teams, like a lead developer, or it could be with a designer as well, and then a project manager, to just from a people perspective understand things that could either trigger a person or something that could stand out about the person. So we did this little check-in, this little health check-in today. I know for a fact that one of our sort of Scrum teams, when they do their morning stand-up, they throw a score out there and they say where they're at. And immediately at the beginning of the workday, you already know where your teammates are at. And like, can you support them? How can you support them? But then also, I feel like mental illnesses, there are certain things, like if something is coming up with the person, if you know a little bit, you can tell. And you'll be able to spot in your team where somebody is having a hard time. So just a light. We can't all be medical professionals. I forgot to put my disclaimer in there. I can only talk from my own experiences. I am not.
We should actually do that at the beginning as well, Skulk. Like, last thing I want is for people being like, they told me on this podcast that I should follow my dreams and quit my job, and I'm like, no. And
look now, I speak from experience, but not from a medical perspective. But I think because I've had so many experiences with different things, there's a lot I can tell, because I'm quite good at building mental models, so I can pick up on these things. But not everybody has that skill. So just doing some basic level of education with your teams on that. The other heading for me is investment, and that is but mental illness in the workplace is for me, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. So the employee has to meet the organization in the middle, and the organization meets the employee in the middle. The employee can't have expectations of an organization to respond to something that they are not aware of its existence. right? That's a one-way street. So that's not fair. So you need to invest. We've done wellness workshops, and I don't know how good they were perceived and so on, but there's definitely, you do your policy, you give people a road to how to address the things, right? So it's a little bit of time and money investment, and you make sure that those policies are readily available. Openness, I could probably have called it transparency. If somebody has a serious medical condition, right? So I'm going to use something like let's say, like they've got a stage 1 cancer, right? And they need to regularly go for a medical checkup. That means, or they might get a treatment, and it might mean 3 days after the treatment they need to work from home, or they need to actually have 3 days off. If the organization knows about it, they can plan for it, right? And I feel that mental illnesses should be treated in the same manner. So tell your organization and tell them what you require and what you need so that they can be prepared. So it's having that openness and transparency from the beginning, not after the event has happened. And then I always look at everything I do in an organization from a fairness perspective. So I want to treat, I feel mental illnesses should be treated the same as any other illness. And I can substantiate why I say that, because I just before that raised that if you know you need an afternoon off because this is your therapy day, and some people's therapy can be way more than just like what we all think therapy is in a movie. It's intense. You don't want to go back to work after. It depends on what the treatment is, right? So you can ask for that day off or that afternoon off or whatever, or you can say, okay, say you have a bipolar disorder, an episode can come out of the blue, right? So how do you handle that so that when somebody is ill, like bodily ill, or somebody is mentally ill, that they all get the same treatment? And I think the organization, if they expected to give somebody a month off for a mental illness, and you look at it from just a like a treatment for cancer, it should be treated in the same way. So the oncologist might give us a letter saying these are the days and these are the symptoms the person is experiencing. Please allow them to have those 3 days off. Why shouldn't you ask that from somebody with mental illness?
Yeah.
And that is how you get the fairness across the board.
Yeah. So, like, no, and this is what I appreciate, is like, I appreciate the openness and the sincerity with which you also speak about it, you know. I think it's very easy to disguise it in like fluffy, flowery language in terms of we support you to be the best you can be and whatever. But like, you know, there are realities, and I think like even within like, because I'm trying to think of like what would be like the most supportive environment that you could be in would be a support group. Okay, so in general, a support group is meant to be a non-judgmental, like safe space that you can be in. And I've definitely, because I've kind of co-run support groups in the past, I've definitely been in places where we had to tell people you are no longer allowed to come. Like because there's like an agreement in terms of a baseline behavior. And unfortunately, it's nothing personally against you. It's just like in order for us to protect everyone else in the group, like there are limits. Like you can't. And I think I'm qualified to say this because I struggle with a lot of like mental problems and histories and stuff. Is it fair that I have to deal with this stuff and someone else doesn't? You know, like I also don't believe that everyone equally has their fair share of like suffering or whatever. I think it is unevenly distributed. Like I don't think the world is fair. And that's just a reality. Like whether it should be fair or not is irrelevant. I don't think the world is fair. In some manners, like some of the mental stuff that I've have to deal with and had to deal with isn't fair. But at the end of the day, I am the one that needs to take responsibility for that, and no one else is going to. I can help people. I can have people help me, but I can't have other people carry that. Whether that's fair or not is irrelevant. That's the reality. And this is why it's so hard to have these discussions, because our brains kind of crave simplicity and absolute answers. So we want an answer that's like, no, it's your workplace's job to always ensure you are supported and you feel safe, and it's complex, because. And like mental health and mental illnesses are complex by default, but I think at some point, for myself as well, you need to bring something to the table. Because going back to the example of the support groups, you can't. So I'm speaking of a specific instance now where someone was like literally, they were having an episode and they were phoning random people in the support group and they were kind of like threatening them. At some point we have to say, unfortunately, it's nothing personal against you. It's not because, you have, this condition and we are no, because you have this condition, you're not allowed. It's hard for us to, what would be the word, protect others in the group from that. And I think even in organizations, that's a reality. And it might not be something as straightforward as, hey, you are literally sending death threats to your coworkers, but it might be something as simple as, Liesel mentioned, let's say you have a oncology appointment or whatever, if we were to use that metaphor. It might be something as simple as, I have a mental breakdown and I'm going to go home. I can't deal with this. I'm not going to answer any calls. I'm not going to answer any emails. At some point, that is going to become someone else's problem if you just disappear. And that, for all you know, that person might also be having mental struggles. They might also be going through a hard time. And that isn't fair. So I think my own history with this as well, I think sometimes there's a temptation to look at it through a very individualized manner, where it's the company doesn't care about me, and they're screwing me over. And I think those conversations can be had. I think there are a ton of circumstances, I think more often than there should be, where companies screw people over for various reasons. But there's also the reality of having these discussions and it just being problematic practically for you to either not treat this thing that you have or not try and manage it yourself and let the team assist you in managing it. Those are hard conversations. Yeah.
Skalk, I totally hear you, because I think it feels like there's a lot of blame going around for organizations.
Yeah.
And then the person's treatment of the situation wasn't correct. So I mean, I've seen, and the other thing that people have to understand, and why, I even wrote this down because it's so important. I speak from a tech company perspective. We manage people's companies' infrastructure. We sit with their code in our code repos. Our IP, not our clients' IP, is stuff that needs to be protected. Now a person has an episode and they disappear and we can't locate their computer and we can't contact them. At that moment, they have put the organization in huge risk. And, my job is to de-risk the organization. So that's a big problem for me. I'm like a dog, that the jaws have clamped. I cannot leave that situation until I know that the person is safe, our equipment is safe, our customers' data and our clients' IP is in a safe space, right? And I've had circumstances where I haven't spoken to the person in 2 weeks, so I know nothing. There's no information being sent through to us as an organization. And I think I used this when I answered you on LinkedIn, is it also has a monetary effect on us, because I immediately need to replace that resource on the team. So now I've got a resourcing issue without knowing when the person is going to be back. Then the expectation of the organization is to have open arms and welcome the person back, because our approach is support, kindness first, and then we deal with the HR. But we start with that. But how far does a person expect an organization to go if you look at how it was handled in the first place, right? Surely the support, the people around this person knows that he has a very specific mental illness. It has great repercussions. It can come on quite fast. So your support group, your brothers, sisters, your mom, dad, partner, wife, whomever, they need to know what to do in those circumstances, right? So at that point, they also need to step in and give the organization information so that we can take the necessary steps. Should we take quite a hard stance on that, we'd be almost thrown under the bus, and it would be the organization that gets hurt through that, because people are so outspoken. So it would be framed in a way that the organization is the wrong party, whereas actually from the get-go the situation was handled poorly. And that's why I'm saying people just, if you have that openness and that transparency, and people knowing that they can say something is coming on or something is happening, and then we take the necessary steps and we should secure everything we should secure. That's one way. If you as an organization don't have an opportunity to step in and help navigate the system, how far should it go?
Yeah. And I think also, and I'm curious to hear Skalk Netling's take on this, but maybe just quickly before that, I think it's also worth adding that for myself as well, I have been in situations where I have gone beyond what is reasonable in terms of making provision for people, protecting people from the implications of not showing up for work or whatever. And to this date, that has never ended well. It has never ended well for either party. And I every time I've done that, I've regretted that as a manager. And it's tough. And I think also a distinction needs to be made in terms of, even if so, we can go all the way up to, taking this all the way back to, the current day capitalist model. And I can speak a lot to that, I do, for fear of, it's not that I'm I don't want to offend people or whatever, I actually think the current economic system is highly dysfunctional. And I think as a person that struggles with mental health issues, you get a front row seat to that. But that being said, this is the sports field at the moment. And unfortunately, I don't know. And this is kind of what I would like the theme of this show to be, is I'm very scared now in terms of how I'm expressing myself. I'm not finding the words, but I actually want that to be a good thing, is, things that are hard to articulate. So I might actually regret the way I express it, but, I'm just going to allow it. I think the reality is all of us, are just trying to survive. And I also think that we need to make a distinction, when we talk about IO Digital and so forth. We're not talking about, BP or Shell or Coca-Cola or whatever, I think there's a conversation to be had about those corporations. But in between me and those big corporations are smaller companies, smaller groups of people, smaller enterprises that are just trying to, do something meaningful. And to me, this is where a lot of this conversation happens. And at the end of the day, like I have 2 daughters, I need to be mindful of that. And I can't just be, like there's clearly something going wrong here. I'm your manager and you are like causing a lot of havoc in the team. You're making people like really unhappy, uncomfortable, and you're causing a lot of pain for everyone else. And unfortunately, I can't be I can't just allow that until you get that sorted out, whether that is you seeking treatment or that is like you actually having an honest discussion with the team and saying, this is the reality. What can I do from my side and what can you guys do from your side? And if we can't reach an agreement in terms of where that should meet, then unfortunately, like this isn't a good fit. And I think from my side as well, I see this play out quite a lot of students as well, because of like I'm mostly in the world of academia. So, sometimes like you get those students that, and I think anyone will be just like their mind, like it'll just be very discouraging actually seeing how big mental issues are actually a thing nowadays in the world of academia, like how many of the problems in terms of students dropping out or whatever is related to mental things. But like, there's also a point where you're like, listen, I can help you, I can push you through, we can like take you through the program, ensure you graduate no matter what. But the question is, what then? If it took all this power just to get you to graduate, are you actually, like, where do you go from there? Like what type of jobs are you going to apply for? How are you going to make it as part of a team? And those things feel really unfair. And I think for me personally, that's such a Gordian knot in terms of wrestling with like the apparent unfairness of that, but then also trying to be reasonable as well. And then I think this is also why a lot of people and a lot of companies and whatever just don't engage at all. They're just like, we support our employees, we have pizza days, we go and share our feelings, and we have meditation retreats at the company, and they don't talk about like the on the ground realities of mental health and mental illness. I 100% get that, because even as I'm saying some of these things, I start thinking like, shit, man, like, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast. Am I kind of painting a picture of myself here now that I'm going to be scared, like that I'm going to regret and be like, I regret putting that perception of myself out there. But yeah. Skalk, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I know you've also been in positions where you try to support people in teams where it didn't necessarily go that well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. Let me think where to start. Okay, so I think you bring up something really important, Liesel, and I can highlight quite a recent event in which that didn't play out well, and it's exactly for the reasons that you highlighted. And I think, so what I'm referring to is the fact that somebody disappears and you don't know, like, where's the code you've done? Where's the laptop? Do we need to start off from scratch? What are these things? If that isn't something that's thought through in the beginning, then you have to react in the moment, and that's not going to work out well for anybody. Somebody's going to lose, or everybody's going to lose potentially in this whole thing. So thinking about this up front and having a plan in place, even if that means, like you said, you have to involve family of the person, of everybody on the team, to say, in this scenario, this is what we expect from us, and this is the support we can offer from our side. The meeting in the middle, I think that's important, because you can talk to this from one perspective where somebody has a mental break and they just like don't show up and you can't get in contact with them. But somebody could drive back home this afternoon and be in a horrible car crash and be in a coma. And that's exactly the same thing. Like, there needs to be some kind of process that says, for example, one of the things that we had in a previous client that I was is at the end of your day, ensure that everything you've done is pushed to GitHub. Even if it's work in progress, and that was before draft pull request, stick a WIP label on it, but push it up. Just, it's one of these things that always sucks to think about. It's like thinking about your will and thinking about a funeral plan and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to think about that stuff. Death is one of the things that scares me, and it's not being dead. It's the last, let's say, week. Like, what is that going to be like? It's such an unknown that my brain doesn't know how to deal with it. And so it just tries to protect me from it. And it's not doing a great job because it's just stirring up anxiety in me. So, all of those things, you have to think about it, but you kind of don't. But if you can push through it once and define what it is, then you kind of don't have to think about it again, because now the policies and the processes are in place. So okay, cool, I'm done for the day, push up to get up, now I can go. If I end up feeling really bad and I end up in the hospital, I have a car accident, or I just have a mental health episode and I just cannot work tomorrow, it's fine. My code is there. Everybody knows where everything is. They have a direct line to, let's say, my partner or to my father or mother, depending on what the situation is, so that they can inform them of what the situation is. Because, we just went through that at one of my clients where somebody just fell ill seemingly overnight, which happens. I'm not saying the person's lying at all. And then the second day they were feeling worse. And then they kind of they disappeared from the map, and they started with a part of a project, and now everybody's scrambling around like, we need to get this done on time. Where's the code? We don't know where the code is. Can't get hold of the person because we distribute it. So, one person in the UK, the other one's in the US, the other one's in Europe. So it's not like you can just walk down the street and say, hey, let me just quickly help you push your code up or something. So I think having those processes and thinking about the hard thing, and kind of not drawing a line in the sand, but saying like, this is what is expected, so that we're all safe. And so that if something happens to you, you don't have to have that worry about, I didn't push my code, crap, and I can't get to my laptop, whatever the case may be. I think that helps everybody in that scenario. The other thing that's important is what you mentioned, Liesel, again, is that mental illness. And it's always so weird. I struggle to say that those two words next to each other, mental illness. I always go to mental health. And it's because of, again, the stigma. If you say mental illness, people equate that with, people coming with suits and putting you in a straitjacket and throwing you in a padded room. So immediately when I say mental illness, my brain goes to, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean like, mental illness,
Being sad.
Yeah, or having a lot of stress or anxiety or whatever the case. It doesn't necessarily mean you're insane. Not the same thing. Different. It's a spectrum, like we say now. So I think that is important to say that mental illness and physical illness, same thing. Same thing. It's just two different terms that we're referring to different parts of the human body, but it's an illness is what it boils down to. The reason I say that it's important to treat it that way is because way back, like this is like 12 years ago, I had to go for an operation, not a big operation, but decent size. And so I had to take time off work. The thing is, I live in like the northern side of Pretoria. And I was working in Midrand. So that's a drive in traffic and stuff like that. And the nature of the operation made it so I couldn't drive myself. So I was off for roughly a week and 3 or 4 days. And then I went for a checkup with the surgeon, and he said, you know what? I'm going to book you off for another week. I don't think you're ready yet. And so I let them know about it. And then when I got back, everything seemed fine. Then the performance review came around, and they were like, well, we had this conversation, and honestly, we think you took off way too much time after your operation. So, no bonus for you, also no increase for you for the next year. And I was like, wait, what? I stayed away longer because the surgeon decided it's not a good idea to go back yet. Who are you to tell me that the surgeon doesn't know what he's talking about? And so that caused a very uncomfortable situation. It's the reason I essentially left the company. But if that is how they treat a physical illness, I'm pretty sure if that was mental, I would have been fired on the spot. I wouldn't even have come back from that. And so I think a lot of times people mask and people pretend to be okay because they honestly fear for their job if they are open about it and say, you know what, sometimes I just can't focus. I just can't work because my mind is just all over the place. Maybe I have ADHD and I couldn't get my medication. There was that time where Adderall was, you almost couldn't get it in the United States. And some people, when they don't have their medication, like they can't focus. Would people feel comfortable saying that? I mean, we find it hard to say the medications that we use. By the way, I haven't mentioned mine, so I'll mention them in a sec. But yeah, I think those are some of the critical things that is not being talked about. And if it's not going to get any better. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is, just like people who have to go for cancer treatment or who have heart failure and therefore, have an extended period of time they're off work. What Scott mentioned is our economic system is not set up to support these people. It's like, pony up and get to work or you're not going to be able to pay your house and you're going to lose your house and you and your family is going to end up on the streets. And then you end up doing irresponsible things because you don't want to lose your job. And this should be treated exactly the same for mental things. If you are going through a period of where it's just impossible and you need to have therapy 3 times a day and you have to be off work for a month, there needs to be things in place that supports you financially so that the company can, first of all, backfill your position for a period of time, but you can also take the time you need to get to a place where you can return as a productive member of the team. And that's also not in place. And I think AI and this whole mess that surrounds it is highlighting this. And I'm not sure if people see this because there's so many people that are fearful of their jobs because people are telling them, a lot of this is bullshit, by the way, but your job is in jeopardy. You better start thinking of doing something else because 3 months from now, you're going to be without a job. So,
I just wanted that. Yeah, sorry, no, go on. I thought you were done.
No. So yeah, I mean, these are some of the things that I've experienced and the realities and some of the stuff that just coming out of what all of you said. And then in terms of medication, I take an antidepressant called Arapax, and then I use Dopaquil, and then as of a month ago, I started using Vyvanse for ADHD. So those are the 3 ones that I take. I'd love to know.
We can do medication bingo.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on all the things that I just mentioned.
Yeah. Liesel, you probably have a ton to talk about, but I also just want us to be cognizant of time because I think last time we also realized that the big problem with discussing mental health stuff isn't that there isn't enough to say. And I've seen this definitely happen even when I just have tangential conversations with people. It's almost like there's no point in which you can neatly tie it up because it is such an open conversation that don't have very clear answers. So at some point you just have to say okay, time's up. We need to cut this conversation short. So I'm just giving a heads up of that. I would also like if you can maybe, after your response now, also talk a bit about when do you share this? Because I'm not convinced that saying in the interviewing process, oh yeah, by the way, guys, every 3 months I just black out and I can't remember what I'm doing and I have a mental episode and I wake up naked in the street somewhere, you're okay, what's the other candidates like? That's obviously just for comedic effect, but you get the point. When do you actually surface this, or do you think you should surface this at the very first instance? Because there are realities in terms of the hiring process and so forth.
I wanted when Skalk N was speaking, I wrote a few things around if you do have a mental illness, I think you need to be aware of red flags. So you could perhaps, what we're doing now is we're doing a published handbook, organizational handbook. So if the company has that, and there is and I also wanted to say, Skalk, I'm also very careful when I use the word mental illness. They say you shouldn't say mental illness, you should say mental illnesses, which is a bit of a broader term. Somebody asked me to
So I have mental illnesses. There we go.
Yes.
That's much better.
Just when you're speaking to it.
It's more than one.
I had somebody ask me this week if we can call it a wellness policy. I don't know, because the wellness, I'm not really, wellness speaks to yoga and diet for me. So I'm not 100% sure. I'll take it into consideration. So perhaps if they can make their handbook available to you so that you can see if there's a published policy on it. I think if they're not saying anything about it and you are a person who suffers with mental illnesses or a mental illness, I wouldn't feel weird if somebody asked me about that before. But that's just me personally, because I would want to know as early as possible into the process. But check that. So if they don't have anything published or they're not willing to divulge anything, then just let your red flags come up and move on, I guess, because then you already know, like, you're going to get stuck here. We normally ask for that information after a hire has been made. But when we do explicitly ask in sort of when we collect the employee data. So there a person can at least give the basics, and then if there's something more we wanted to find out, we would probably go to them and ask. Where there's a medical condition, whether or not it's mental illness or like bodily or medical, we just make sure that we have those contacts in place so that we know if something happens, we can contact the right person. What I wanted to respond to Skalk about in terms of what he said. And Skalk, I think you asked, at what point do you say that? I don't know. Every organization is going to be different. I wouldn't necessarily say that just speaking from my perspective, that is going to make a difference in the hire. But I can certainly think that there's organizations where they're going to go, oh, rather not, let's just get somebody that's not, that's going to be the least amount of sick ever. I think South Africa's labor laws allows for quite a bit. You have 36 days in a 3-year cycle in terms of sick leave, and you realistically can use your 36 days in year 1. It just means that in year 2 and year 3, if you have another 36 days, that's going to start legally, that's going to start eating away at your annual leave, or you're going to have to take your leave unpaid. But 36 days to me is not an insignificant amount of days in 3 years. Is it enough? I don't know, but our labor laws are certainly not too bad in terms of that. It's just my feeling around it.
Yeah, I think the number of days is okay, but I think it's the bigger problem, and that's not for a individual corporation to solve. But I think the larger problem is the one that I hinted at, where it's society isn't set up to support people that go through life's traumas. Because it might be that you're having a particularly bad year, not even just from a mental illness perspective, but from stuff happening to people around you that you love and care about. And you might need those 36 days. Like Gideon, for example, that we spoke to before, I'm pretty confident he could have easily used up 36 days in a year when his wife, was diagnosed with cancer. So, yeah. And then, year 2 and 3, what if in year 3 she relapses, which happens, what is he to do then? Now he sits with having to deal with the fact that his wife might pass away and he needs to take unpaid leave, you're not going to do that. You're going to try and juggle all the balls at the same time and probably burn yourself out. And now you have 3 problems. So, and so it's the thing that Schalk spoke to, where the capitalist system is set up in a way where there's no room for this. I mean, for the longest time, if you were a woman, they would ask you if you're thinking about having children soon. And that would be like saying you have a mental illness. They will not hire you if you say yes. Because they're thinking, oh, so in 3 years, we're going to have to give you 3 months off. No. And then you're going to have a kid. Now you're going to have all kinds of stuff that you have to do, and it's going to influence how productive you are. We'll pass. So women would literally say, no, I'm not thinking about it, even if you are, which is...
Meanwhile, they don't know, because we can do it all.
You just say...
No, I was for a significant amount of years a single mother, and I worked a full day. And I'm sorry, but it's totally doable.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So sorry, I jumped into this conversation like at a strange point because I went to the loo quickly. Like a man can only hold for so long. But like so and this is where it gets difficult, and I want, I want kind of the whole premise of these conversations to be about the difficult, scary stuff. So whenever, for myself, I need to remind myself mentally that when we get to this, it's not, I shouldn't be like, oh, let's pull it back a bit. Like let's sit with that. And like, to me, the paradox there is like, Liesel, how do we celebrate that? How do we say, like, that is amazing. That's a phenomenal feat. It speaks to how strong you are as an actual human. But also not shame people who are not able to do that. Not be like, okay, you're a single mother, but there's all these other single mothers who've been able to like pull it together, and so that, how do we have that conversation? Because there's a slippery slope there, where eventually that conversation ends up at a point where it's like, okay, why isn't everyone just like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Like he can like do all of this stuff, and like, what's wrong with you? So like, and this is where it gets hard. And like, I also think like it's so hard for me to have conversations, bring in even the economic model, like that we as a society operate on, into these conversations, because like I partake in that model, but I also understand it's very problematic. But I don't think saying that, capitalism, schmapitalism, sucks, burn it down, like just saying that I think there's a lot to unpack there, and like a lot of valid things. But I also think at some point that's not an excuse to not engage with the reality that is the world right now. And because I think that's a bit of a cop-out, saying that it's the system that's the problem. So unfortunately, everything sucks, and I'm not going to actually do anything meaningful, and you guys are going to get screwed over, and it's just the system that sucks. I don't know. It might be, I think, like you can say maybe I'm misguided, but I do think at the very least, like, can we not just make things, however that story needs to play out in my lifetime or in my daughter's lifetime, whatever happens there, because it's definitely not sustainable. So whether we like burn the planet to cinder before then or whatever, like however that plays out, let me just focus on the reality that is the little space in which I operate, and how can I make things more reasonable? How can, at the very least, so I don't know, like it's hard conversations.
I hear you. I can't make anybody think differently about it. You can try and influence thinking. I cannot change how other organizations choose to run their organizations. I certainly cannot take on big corporations. Yeah. I'm not trained to take on anything legal or how a country decides to write the laws, right? What I can do is I can control the part that I play in it. So there are insurances that you can take out for yourself. So when an illness renders you into a position where you cannot earn an income, or your organization, you can still have a conversation with your organization and say, I'm not going to be able to work for 3 months. And your organization might say, well, we can financially carry you for 1. But beyond that, and if the organization literally doesn't have the money, can we expect the organization to just make the money? I know that there's organizations that will have the money, but they're not going to make it available. So I'm just speaking from my perspective. I cannot make the money appear to keep somebody going for a longer period of time, say 3 months, and hire somebody or get somebody in their space. I'm paying double for 3 months to keep the person's position, right? So have your own insurances in place, so that if something happens to you and you do have an episode that's going to last 3 months or longer, that you have something to claim from. Like that's why we have insurances. So I would recommend that just to anybody, have those things in place. Maybe for certain illnesses, they make you pay a little bit more, but I also can't change how insurance companies view these things. But what I can do is I can have insurance in place for myself if something happens to me. And then you can choose how you engage with your organization. You can choose the organization that you work for. And just at least if they've got a policy, it means that they are open to a conversation. So choose the organization that you work for. Choose to be open and transparent with them and see how they handle the information. And be proactive. Don't drop them in these situations, because you're asking for a financial contribution, yet you haven't armed them with, he probably has load shedding, it's just after 2. And that's what, again, where I come back to that two-way street. But I'm a very firm believer in the internal locus of control. So whatever you as a person can control, that is, for me, that's my safe space. So if I can have all those things in line, then I'm not as fluctuated with like how things go. I don't know if that makes sense. But you can sort of keep things as stable as possible, and it might go a little that way and might go a little that way. But if you have your stuff under control and ready and set up, and if you have medication, you take it when you should be taking it, you go for your regular checkups. That's how you keep the system stable, right? So that you don't allow it really to just completely tip over and then having to start from scratch. So that's kind of how I see it, but I'm not 100% convinced that we're somehow just going to change how people see these things. I surely we can influence it, and people can drive it and almost force it forward. But there is this reality that you can't get away from, is that it's just at this point, that is how it's built. So maybe the newer organizations coming in and the smaller organizations certainly are the ones leading the way with that. But institutional companies who's been in existence for 150 years, I don't know. I don't know how.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean,
how that is going to play out.
Yeah, large ships turn slowly. So, but the thing is,
absolutely.
But I do think that, there's some. So first of all, when I was referring to like I'm sure there's still companies that do that, where they ask you about, as a woman, are you thinking about having children, that kind of thing, and saying like the answer to that question can be as detrimental to you getting the job as saying you have a mental illness. What I meant by that is, you shouldn't be thinking about it in that sense. If somebody asks you that question, you shouldn't be thinking about, oh, I know what you want me to say. You want me to say no, right? And we're going to tell you no. You should be thinking, oh, they're probably asking me so they can understand what kind of affordances they should make for me. This is not a do or die question. This is we need to understand what your plans are, because you might be at the company for the next 3 years, and we need to understand that we need to plan for this. That's a very different conversation than thinking about it from if I say yes, I'm gonna not get this job. And little do they know, I can manage, but I do need a little affordance here and there. Like I might need a Friday off because I need to take my kid to sport. Or I might need, as somebody with a mental illness, I might get into a situation where I need the Friday off because I just need a day off.
Yes.
If that is why they're asking the question, then that's a great conversation to have. But I think that I'm sure that is not why they were asking those questions. They were asking them as a flag of, we're going to sit here and talk to each other for another 15 minutes, but we already know that the answer is no. So that's kind of what I was hinting towards that. And then I don't expect a company to just carry somebody along. At some point it doesn't work. What I was referring to, things not being set up, I think that is where a government comes in. And that's where they need to play a role in setting up supportive systems that people can fall back on, so that it's not all in the company, it's not all on the individual either. Because, like insurance is a tough thing because they're expensive. So you need a really good job to be able to afford them.
I understand,
if you lose that job, you might lose your insurance. And now when you reapply, they're going to punish you because you lapsed. I know because I've been there. I had medical aid. And then I left the company, tried to do my own thing. Things didn't quite get there. I ended up losing my medical aid. And then my wife had to go into labor and they didn't want to cover it. So we had to make a plan. And again, this is where we couldn't rely on the government then because they didn't have any support there. Their hospitals couldn't, I don't even want to go into this. It was horrible. We ended up at California Hospital and it was, the things I saw there and things my wife saw there, you should never see that in your life. That is not a hospital. That is, I don't know what to call it, but it was frightening. It was frightening. And so that, that is all the things that I was leaning towards. So I do think that we need, as people who live this life and who experience these things, we need to be like evangelists. Like, you get your dev evangelist that talks about how cool a company's products are. We need to evangelize that these are the problems. We need to do something about this. Who's willing to jump in and help here? And it can be corporations, it can be individuals, it can be governments. I don't know, but we need to talk about it.
There's perhaps a little bit of a domino effect because if the organization isn't supported by the government through some kind of, maybe there's like a tax relief or something that you could apply that could make it easier for the organizations to absorb it, right? So again, I speak for a small organization. It's a lot of the time is feast or famine, eh? We've got something that I call little HR sort of customizations. And that is when somebody's got a special circumstance. And that's where I would perhaps put the fairness that I speak so much about, like a little bit aside, because I understand that this person might not earn that much. So what I would ask of one person who's in a high pay bracket and what I would ask of somebody who's in a lower pay bracket is perhaps a little bit different. So for somebody in a lower pay bracket, I would actually approach that in a different manner because I know they wouldn't be able to take the financial hit. I know Rich coming from me saying have insurance in place, but in South Africa, that is the reality because our government doesn't support any of this. You say no, you've had to go to a hospital, which in your opinion isn't even a hospital. That's why we get medical aid and pay excruciating fees for it. Maybe the next person you need to get somebody that can speak to government and like how to petition to change these things. If you want to really go at it, skulk.
So you guys said the big G word, and then all my power went off. You summoned the wrath of state-owned monopolies, and ESCOM decided that I no longer am going to be allowed to have power. Thanks, guys. Thanks for bringing the government.
There's
into
another
this.
thing that you have to spend your money, your hard-earned cash on, is keeping your own lights on.
So if anyone was like, hey, there's something off here, why is Skalkventer so quiet? Like this isn't usually the case. It's because I didn't have power, so I just started up the generator now. But that's kind of if I'm understanding where you guys are at in this conversation, that's the problem, is that you have all this cascading things, and at some point it shouldn't be fair that there shouldn't be enough safety nets, that you need to decide. You need to realize that if I'm going to let this person go, I'm literally throwing them to the wolves. So I don't know, we can have all those conversations, but at the end of the day, how can we, given that is the situation, given that we have load shedding and, our entire state-owned organizations have been looted and whatever, given that's a reality, we can be angry about the whole day, but where do we as a human that exists right now in this day, in the environment that I'm in, can I kind of just help others operate in a reasonable space? I really appreciate, so Skalk, you also know JD Botma, so I really he has the saying where he's he doesn't even want people to live, he doesn't care if people live amazing lives or fulfilling lives, he just wants everyone to live an okay life. He just wants people to be okay. To someone to be my life was unsatisfying at best, I just went to work, but it's okay, I, at the very least, I wasn't living on the street or whatever. And and I think this is the thing here, what can we do to just make people that have mental health issues and so forth be okay? Even if that means they're not necessarily living their best lives, at the very least, how can we make the rough edges less intense? But yeah,
I like that.
Yeah. So, but we probably need to start
just living an okay life.
Yeah. There. Skalk 2023, Skalkventer 2023, live your okay life. That's
live your best okay life.
Live your best mediocre life. There is words to live by. Yeah. But just what a way to end this. But yeah,
I have one.
Go for it.
I have one interesting thing just in closing. So it's just something I'm involved with Open Collective, which is a nonprofit that exists to support open source and essentially, but it's not just open source, essentially give you a way to receive funds for work you do and do it all in the open. They do a lot more stuff than that. There's more stuff coming. But the interesting thing that I learned there is there's this, I think it's in Oklahoma. No. Tulsa. The Tulsa tech community has an open collective, and everybody that wants to, that's in tech, will contribute a monthly fee to this. And when any individual member of the tech community there is going through a tough time financially, they can submit their expenses to that collective and they pay it. So that's how they, as a small little community in Tulsa, support each other. So that is something we can think about. If the government doesn't play book, the companies can't because they're being hamstrung by regulation. Maybe as a community, we can find a way of creating our own little support fund. And then it's a job to do. You need people to give time freely of them, free time to do this. And you have to be careful that people don't extort you for money. But it works. It works for them because it's in each person's benefit for this thing to be healthy. So those are the kinds of things we can kind of explore.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know how they ensure that fairness. Is it through a questionnaire or?
I don't know the details. I kind of just learned about them. I've invited them on another podcast I have to chat about that.
So what I've found especially with a lot of open source stuff, a lot of these kind of type things, what generally works well, and I've burnt my fingers enough times to realize, okay, you can't just be this is a rainbow happy place and everyone gets to contribute. Is generally you get what you give. So if you don't actually put in work and try and make this project better, and you show up one day and say, hey, I'm using this library and like it doesn't do this, you guys suck, why is it not doing this? Why don't you have this functionality? You know, like there's like you equally weigh how much, like, what would be the word? How much say someone has by how much they actually contribute. If someone who's a big contributor says, like, guys, like there's this big functionality that's missing, that's going to have a lot more weight. And I would imagine it would work in the same way, where if you're involved in the tech community, if you've kind of you've kind of been part of discussions around this thing and whatever, and you show up and say, like, listen, I have a terminal illness, whatever, I don't have enough money. That's a different conversation than someone who's like, who the hell is this guy? Just shows up and has like, hey, I need some money, guys. Generally, I would find like that is how most open source stuff are actually run. It's almost a progressive, you almost build up trust progressively. Because we also don't go, and if someone says, hey, I want to contribute to this library, be like, cool, I'm going to make you a co-admin. And it's the same with FedSA as well. We've had a lot of people that are like, hey, I want to actually help with FedSA and so forth. And then in a week, we don't hear from them again. It's also the same. You kind of progressively, we're like, okay, cool. Maybe just help, like actually greet people at the next event or whatever. And then you do that. And we kind of give you a bit more responsibility, a bit more. So you progressively kind of build that trust. And I assume it would be the same. But yeah. We probably need to end it off here. And yeah, man, this is something I'm going to have to get used to. It's like there's never a good point because there's no way to tie it up nicely and be like, all right, guys, there we've kind of covered this topic. And I'm also talking about mental health at DevConf. So I'm also very scared in that regard because it's only 40 minutes. And I'm just going to have to get a point where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have to end it here. There's no nice ribbon to tie it all up because it is like a super open question and there's a lot of complexity. All right. I don't know if there's anything anyone wants to say before we start heading into ending off territory.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I think a good place would be like maybe sharing anything that was useful or that you found insightful or helpful recently, whether it be a book or whatever. And I think from my side, one thing that I found surprisingly insightful is, I don't know if you've seen that documentary on Netflix, I think it's Remember to Take Your Pills, the Xanax one. And so the wife and I started watching it. Wife's in pharmacology. And I was really expecting like, I don't know, very sensationalized like take. But like I actually found it to be very nuanced and like insightful. And, and they also talk about like, like anxiety and so forth. Like for a very long time, like people were just self-medicating with alcohol. And, like when we talk about like our grandparents and their grandparents, like alcohol abuse was just like the order of the day. And so it's not like anti-anxiety medication is just this made up thing all of a sudden where, people can't deal with stress and they're getting like emotionally lazy or whatever now, or there's a pill for everything. So I found that very insightful and like a really insightful and interesting discussion. Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys kind of encountered anything the last couple of weeks that you found helpful or insightful.
So I watched a video on TED by Francis Frey called How to Build and Rebuild Trust. And it's a great one. It's an absolutely wonderful one. And I think we touched on that topic quite a bit today. When there's no trust, there's nothing. And there are very particular guidelines that she highlights in there. And she talks about how things at Uber went really off the rails, and how they tried to rebuild this trust internally. So that was a great conversation. And I like what she said, that if we can learn to trust one another more, we can have unprecedented human progress. And I do think that's the case. I think in a lot of cases, trust gets broken down, and then as such, it's each person for themselves, and that doesn't end well. So I would say that is a great video, a great talk to listen.
Maybe not unprecedented progress, but maybe we can all just live okay lives. Let's end it there.
Yeah.
If we trust one another, we can strive towards living okay lives.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. This was really great. I wish we could go on for another hour.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, don't ever say sorry.
My next meetings are lined up for me. No, I love talking about this. I don't actually want to stop. But I'm gonna have to call it 100%. A day.
Cool. But thanks for giving us some of your time, Liesel.
Thanks so much, Liesel.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I hope it helped.
Okay. It did.
Cool. All right. Cheers, everyone.